own power for self-use without a license. While delivering his opening keynote address at the African Mining Indaba, the minister in this portfolio, Gwede Mantashe, told delegates that government conceded that power shortages by Eskom were hammering the industry. Other speakers also raised their concern at this event, which is currently underway in Cape Town. So to discuss some of these matters from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town, we're joined by Athi Jara, who's director for mining, of mining, I should say, at law firm Gwina Attorneys. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Athi.
Thank you for having me, Sakina.
So, Athi, let's just start with that announcement by Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe. It came as a surprise to many. But what exactly does it mean when the minister acknowledges that there is a shortage but speaks about generating power without licenses? How is that going to work?
So the issue of, the need for a stable supply of electricity in the mining industry, it affects two points. The first one being that, mining companies need a stable supply of electricity for their own mining operations. But in addition to that, there's been talk, of, growing or developing a beneficiation industry in South Africa. And that, in order for that beneficiation industry to be successful and implemented in the country, there needs to be a stable supply of electricity. So, the mining industry welcomes, this positive, stance by the DMR to, expand the electricity generation in the country and allow, private companies, including mining companies, to be able to generate their own electricity. It's a step in the right direction.
A step in the right direction, but what does this mean overall? Because if everybody then starts producing their own electricity without licenses, where does this ultimately lead to?
One, there would need to be a connection to the national grid. And there needs to be systems and processes that need to be put in place to ensure that as much as someone is generating their own, electricity, that generation is authorized. And this takes me to the Water Services Act, for instance, which was enacted in order to give effect to the right to water under the Constitution and to ensure that all South Africans have stable access to water. And as a result of that, there's the Water Services Act that says, someone may be able to supply water to someone else, but the authorities need to get involved and they need to authorize that supply of water. So it would be the same thing with electricity, where yes, there would be no licenses, but the authorities, there needs to be registration of that supply of electricity, and the authorities need to be aware that there is this supply of electricity that's going maybe to a specific mining operation or a specific plant, and it releases the pressure on the national grid.
Now, Auntie, there were also other issues that came under discussion raised by the speakers. This is, of course, a 4-day event. There were crime and safety issues that were discussed, for an example, as well as the crisis of reputation and the need to do things in a safer and more sustainable way. But what would you say are the major factors and challenges that need to be dealt with within the industry most speedily?
I would say the main issue needs to be this issue of communities and consultation with communities. I mean, in the recent period, we've seen certain cases come through the courts. We've seen the Maledu case. We also saw the Kolobeni case. And even before those two cases, there was the Bengwenyama case, where the courts pronounced and spoke on this issue of community consultation. So it is now up to the DMR to have a stable and definition of what is a community in whatever legislation comes, which will regulate the mining industry. And in addition to that definition of who is a community, you'll find that communities will group themselves into different structures. There'll be a communal property association. There'll be a community trust that's registered, and the beneficiaries of that trust are community members. Or some communities will also register a company, so there'll be a PTY Limited that's registered. In addition to those structures, there's also this question of traditional authorities and traditional councils. There'll be a royal family or a king in place over a mining community. And that's also taking into account that there may also be factions or divisions within a community. So there'll be maybe one half of the community that's pro your mining project, while the other half may very well not be. So then it becomes a matter of who do you as a mining company approach, when you're required to consult with communities. Do you approach the king? Do you approach the community trust? Or do you speak to maybe a faction that is pro your mining project? So those are the challenges that currently exist, and bearing in mind that communities are very important in the mining space, because they are the ones who have to deal with the issues of mining on a daily basis. They are the ones within close proximity of mines, and they are the ones who feel the effects of mining on a daily basis. So I'm hoping that the DMR is going to provide some sort of clarity around that question of communities and who should mining companies go to when they need to consult with communities.
That's a very interesting one, because obviously it doesn't only just end with the mining company, the DMR, and the community. You have other departments that then come into play, like the Department of Environmental Affairs, who could step in and say, hold up, there are these or that consideration to be taken into account. You also have, as you pointed out previously, issues around water, where that department may have to step in and get involved. So how do you resolve all of these things? Because I think what you're raising is very critical in terms of how ultimately these deals are struck and also structured.
So what we saw, especially with the amendment, the 2014 amendments to the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, as well as the National Environmental Management Act, is that the DMR became the sole entity or institution that mining companies need to approach for their environmental authorizations and their mining rights. So the DEA was sort of, taken out of the picture insofar as mining is concerned. So that was a good step. They called that the One Environment System. But now you still have a situation where mining companies have to approach the DMR, or the DMRE as it's now called, and the Department of Water and Sanitation. So then there's still, multiple departments, that you play a role in the mining industry, and that I would recommend that the departments take it a step further and make the DMR a one-stop shop for mining companies to apply for their water use licenses, their mining rights, as well as environmental authorizations.
And then I think that's a critical point of discussion, because, when investors talk about policy uncertainty, when they talk about the ease of doing business, those are some of the things that need to be taken into consideration. And then there is, of course, the safety issue as well. And by all indications, reports show that there were fewer fatalities in the last while, but still, it is still a concern that people are still dying in our mines.
Sakina, the reality is that, mining is, it's a difficult job. And, we've looked at mines all over the world, and, fatalities do, take place, unfortunately. However, it becomes a matter of, what are the mines doing, to prevent those fatalities? What are the measures that have been put in place? And most importantly, are those measures, or commitments that have been made by the mining industry to provide those safety measures, are they are they being enforced? Is the DMR or the chief inspector of mines, who's charged with overseeing the Mine Health and Safety Act, is he doing what he needs to do insofar as holding those mines accountable and making sure that mines, comply with their commitments to health and safety in the mining space?
And then, Athi, just the final one for now. What other topics are expected to be discussed throughout the week?
A very interesting one is this question of beneficiation. And I'm I'm a proponent of beneficiation in South Africa because, it would create a whole new industry and it would lead to job creation and growth of our economy, which would be, very positive. So I'm hoping that the DMR is going to provide, more or make more strides insofar as beneficiation is concerned. For instance, the current provisions regarding beneficiation in the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, there's vague language that the minister must promote beneficiation, but it doesn't go further to state how the minister can promote this beneficiation and achieve, growth in the beneficiation industry. So I'm hoping that, the DMR can just dig deeper and, come up with a solution on how South Africa can have a beneficiation industry.
Well, Athi, thanks so much for breaking it down for us there. Athi Jara is Director of Mining at Law at Gwina Attorneys, and reflecting on some of the concerns raised at the opening of the mining Indaba currently underway in Cape Town, and it will continue until Thursday. So we're going to take a break and we'll speak to you after.